And I've
Oh, he's got it. All right.
12-hour day tomorrow.
All right. Good evening and welcome to the school committee meeting of March 6, 2022. This meeting is being broadcast on WHCA and also being recorded. We are going to go into executive session. Before we do that, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance, please. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. So in a moment, we will be going into executive session. There will be two components. One, to discuss the strategy with respect to collective bargaining or litigation, if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining or litigating position of the public body. And two, to review and approve executive session minutes pursuant to General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A7, to comply with or act under the authority of any general or special law or federal grant and aid requirements. Purpose 7, citing open meeting law. After the executive session, we will continue with our meeting and the agenda. Can I get a motion to go into executive session?
Second.
And that is a roll call vote. Yes, yes. Fred? Yes. Beth? Chris? Yes. Mike? Yes. Chris, yes. Hillary?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes. Good.
David? Dawn?
Yes.
Michelle? Yes. Steve?
Yes.
And you don't have to vote on that. Okay. We are in executive
Executive
session.
Yes.
Great. Sweet. All right, we are back from executive session, and we're going to just move right into the agenda. So the first item we have is public comment, if there is any. Is anyone here for public comments? Not at this time. Okay. Student advisory report. I don't
see Anna today,
Anna. So we'll keep going. All right, next we have some minutes to approve. So I'd be looking for a motion to approve the minutes of February 2nd, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous, great. Next, I'd be looking for a motion to approve the meeting minutes of February 9th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor? Great, unanimous. All right, and then I think we're going right into the superintendent's report.
So starting out, we talked about goals as I progressed throughout the year, just kind of updating you where we're at. So just reviewing the goals, one of the goals was to work on early childhood education, full day K. You'll see a presentation put together by the EEC committee that's posted on the website. I'm going to give you some grace and not show you the video that I did. I am not comfortable behind camera, but Marcus Casey and Dr. Foley put together a great script for me and did a lot of edits. So hopefully it grabbed some attention. My kids think I'm a YouTube star now, so it's awesome. And to David's credit, he gave us some really good ideas on how to frame it for a different generation other than a 54-year-old guy. So thank you on that.
Thank you.
And I think it's beneficial, and I'll show you the presentation. So we're progressing on that. I think no matter what happens out of school committee, as we move this budget forward, I think this is a topic that will continue if it doesn't move forward. We'll continue this discussion on early childhood education, which I think we have to start branching off to pre-K as well, looking at where we are as a district. Another goal is to work with MSBA in the building project. Fred's going to talk a little bit about today in the building subcommittee. We actually did a tour with some designers. Today was the day. The building is progressing as follows. We do have a OPM, or Owner's Project Manager, which is the Colliers Group, and that's progressing along. I think I have George here a little bit to talk about where we are with MTSS. We've talked a lot about interventionists and where they are in the budget. We're going to transition those names from interventionists to coaches, which a lot of districts use, and what they're actually doing in the classroom. So George, can you give a little heads up of where we're at with testing and MTSS?
Hey folks, nice to see you. So right now at this point in time, our interventionists, as we know, our coaches are both in the district and at the school level. And really what's taking place now at this point of the year is we're in our 6-week cycle again of where we're having groupings. And these groupings are based on the data of our second interim assessment. And what's taking place in those is that students are being grouped by both where they're at from an academic standing of positivity and where they're at from an academic standing of holes or gaps or learning loss. And then during this time when they have power block, these groups go with a certain educator or paraprofessional to really focus on that gap area. And if you're a student who's now succeeding or progressing, you also have a teacher with you where you get to extend or do something different, either it's a book research project or whatever it is to extend that learning time. As we move forward into getting ready now for MCAS, that's going to change a little bit where students will then move back for power block or this intervention coaching time, they'll be able to move back to their regular scheduled teacher as we start to prepare for our MCAS testing. That's basically at the elementary school. At the middle school level, what we found that meets with most success, just based on the staffing and the students, is that really we're using our interventionists to now push in and co-teach with another teacher. So example, we have identified gaps in students learning from data, and when this time is taking place, we're using, when our interventionists or our coaches do not have a small group with them, they're pushing into the classes with the students with the most needs, who are not identified as special ed, so that we can have a co-teaching model, so that we can get to those students right in their regular classroom, in their natural environment, as it were, so we can try to remediate those. That has also gone now to the high school level. The high school level is now designed throughout the course of the year, sort of intervention study halls. And those intervention study halls, or those intervention strategies courses, are for students who are identified using IXL and ELA and math, where they have gaps. And the staff, the counselors, the academic staff have identified those students and placed them during the course of their regular schedule, instead of like in a study or instead of in a regular strategies class, into these classes with staff who are now know the data, know what they're looking for, and can help them. I think the overarching goal of this is that for the first time, between data meetings with regular ed teachers, and for the first time, we are now looking at the data of individual students as we progress throughout the day and throughout the week. So it's live, it's up to date, it's in real time, and we're able to offer not only the regular education that the students need, but now we're able to remediate those gaps that we've always had. Like I've always said, this is not something that is new to education, it's just actually new to Whitman Hanson. And as we proceed and as we move forward, I think the combination of taking our interventionist and pushing into the regular classroom with all students, and then still having the ability to put students in small groups, is going to be where we find the ability to catch kids up in real time and not have them then miss anything while they're being caught up. So that's one of the major things. I know another piece that is part of Jeff's goals is the whole equity. We did have an equity audit. One of the things that we're looking forward to as we sort of galvanize what the things we need to work on is not only our ELL population and perspective and what we're doing from a curriculum standpoint for those students, but it's also what is a workable definition of the term equity in the Whitman Hanson Regional School District. I think sometimes when we hear the word equity, it goes to everything that we know in our life that we associate with that word. And I think fleshing that out, I think having some discussion, and I think having a working definition of what equity is, and I will say, I'm not that smart of a guy, so there's great graphics that explain it. That's what we're looking to put forward. So then we put forward to our district, we put forward to our school committee, we get feedback, and then we can all refer to, well, wait a minute, we're talking about this definition of equity as we look at things like, what do students need to be successful? And what do students need to be successful, not from how they look, where they're from, all of those things, but what they need. And if we're going to get to a state of equity, we need to make sure we can do that. A further thing that we're looking at and we're going to be analyzing and acting on next year as far as equity is, do students who might not look like other students, or who might look like some students or some subgroup of students, are they receiving the education and learning about people in literature, in history, in things that look and resemble them? You will notice that, or maybe you don't, but at the end of every MCAS test, certain grades take what's called a vocal survey. The vocal survey is something that it's asked broad range questions that lead from social emotional, that lead to equity, that lead to economics, that lead to bullying, that lead to safety. And some of the questions they ask is, do you read and see people in literature that resemble people that look like you or that look like your classmates? And when we really look at that, a lot of the answers, over 40% of the answers at the different grade levels are no, we don't. So one of the things when we talk about equity is that we have to start looking at the characters that we teach in literature, the books that we read, the authors that we look at, the people, the gender of the people that we look at, to say, is this representative of everybody in Whitman Hanson? And so those are the real pieces that Jeff has really promoted so that we can work on as we move into further equity, as not only this year, but as this project goes forward.
Thanks, George. Fred?
Are these new positions?
No. These are positions, these are people who currently work with us, who we are just talking with, using, and moving forward.
So we're not adding?
No, but the code, not at this point in time. Yeah, we might have some.
Yeah, we're changing what they're.
Yeah, we might have restructuring coming, but we're not adding. We're just saying, what is best and what conversations need to be had. But most of this is happening though with our current employees, like in their current roles, and we're just having these discussions.
The gaps that we're finding are normal gaps and not anything that we could say based upon COVID? The remediation is a normal way of us interacting with kids, or we may be changing the methods,
Sure.
but we've been always able to.
Right. I would say this. If we go back to George Bush and No Child Left Behind, this was that global attack. That was the global large-scale piece to try to get to the same thing. All kids will be reading at grade level by grade 3. That did not meet with success for various reasons, but it highlighted the fact that in everyone's educational life, not all kids are on the same page. This has been magnified now by the epidemic, but it has always been there. I truly think it'll always be there because all students are different and they learn differently. So what we're finding is there is some of that. Like I missed fractions in grade 6 of March. So I need help with fractions to get to higher math thinking, and we can catch those students up. It's also, though, I do not have consonant blends at 1st or 2nd grade. And so now we have the ability to target those skills because we know those skills. And now we're training paraprofessionals and we're getting materials in so that those 6 students who have that consonant blend issue can go with a paraprofessional or go with a teacher because we're mixing up where the kids are during the school day and catch them up quicker so that by 3rd grade they are reading at the same time. So some of this is brought on as a result of missed knowledge from COVID. Some of this is brought on from the biological makeup of the students, and now we have processes in place to make sure we can remediate those skills early enough to make sure by the time they get older that they can catch up and hopefully minimize special education and increase their knowledge in a way like everyone else.
Thank you.
I think this is a comment before my question, but Fred, to your point, the state hasn't changed the MCAS at all, right? So it's really important that, because 3rd grade is the first time kids take the MCAS.
Yes.
And while it doesn't necessarily count, right, it does go into state data, and we compare the kids all over. And at the high school level. So these intervention, you know, while we are recognizing, people in education are recognizing that there are deficiencies in students for a variety of reasons, the state doesn't care. And I say that, right? I mean, with the MCAS.
Sure.
And I say that as a 10th grade ELA teacher. So this is awesome and great. So my question, I guess, is around the MCAS. I know the state went back to, instead of waiving, you have specific windows when we are going to be administering them this year. Like last year, you had a bigger window of when you could give them. So with, particularly at the middle school and elementary schools, are they still doing the diagnostic testing for the kids, or are we trying to space it out so that they're not testing and then testing again and then testing again?
That's a great question. And I think it's also important that what these coaches and these interim assessments, which are, you know, the timed assessments throughout the year are doing, is providing live data that's fresh. Whereas an MCAS might just tell you what happened last year to a whole group of students. This is what happened today, next week, last week, and now we can design instruction from a technological standpoint to remediate as we go. But we will be following the MCAS schedule as laid out. So what we're doing is we're in the middle of our last 6 weeks of moving classes. Then we'll stay with those groups for about 3 weeks to just get some refresher on MCAS. I will say that the Whitman Hanson Regional School District is more interested in how we're doing individually with the data we have that's live on students and their deficits than maybe a state test, because I think it's been proven that through COVID, if you look at the College Board and you know how my daughter took her AP tests in her room, I think under the covers on one of them, maybe that caused some concern for the country. We will still do what MCAS says, but our final determination and our final year-end interim assessment will be the first week of June.
Okay.
The second week of June will be to compare that data, and then because we are here longer, because we're here till the 23rd now, and then we will be able to make moves to say, is this something for a summer program? Is this something that's just the last data of students in school that'll then be used to start the next year? So that's how we're looking at it. Yes, we are tightening it up so we can get our MCAS review and that prep in of how to take this kind of test, but then we're going to be moving forward with back to what it is that we know, we feel is working by the data. And one last point that Hillary brought up is, yes, we start testing in 3rd grade. However, what we're doing now, we start testing and looking at student data now in kindergarten. So that has been a growth experience of like accountability for our K1 and 2 teachers because it's been a change. That's always sort of fallen to the 3rd grade teachers, like, oh my God, now I have tests and people look at my scores and my kids and growth. But now that starts earlier. And what that does is after you get over the initial shock and after teachers realize that that's not a gotcha, but it's how we can make students in front of us better, we know the gaps of the students, but what it also allows us to do is now look for the gaps or look for the pieces that instruction that can be improved based on the students you have in front of you. Not the students you didn't know about, but the actual students you have in front of you. And then the ability to have flexible groupings within that time is really sort of getting to know our kids in the best way possible to make changes to help them learn better. So that's the whole total goal. And it's a credit, I'll give Jeff a plug, he's my boss. It's a credit to the way he's allowed us to move forward with this.
Question on the equity audit. When and who performed that, and is there a report that the committee can get?
Sure. The equity audit was done. I'm blanking on Judy DeLucia's place name.
Seaside.
Seaside Consultants. Seaside Consultants was the group that did our equity audit, and what that consisted of was meetings between them and us, what we're looking for, meetings between teachers, staff, select groups of people to say, and then a transfer of information. And then basically what we did was I went into this saying, I'm not quite sure how to attack this problem. However, I think we need to come together as the Whitman Hanson Regional School District to say, so how are we doing? Do we have gaps? Do we have spaces? Do we have things to work on? So there is a report. We met with them and we debriefed, and we received it probably late fall, and probably just about the time we got the budget. And we then said, how do we act from their action steps and summary? So they give you all the positives, all the negatives, the summaries, the pieces, and you move forward from there. So that's what we're analyzing now.
Chris?
Just curious, you mentioned the name of the organization was Seaside?
Yeah.
That performed the audit. Is that something they specialize in, or is that
It's a consulting.
other types of audits?
Yeah, so it's a consulting firm, and this consulting firm came about because they were some of the people that DESE had used, and that the MSAA, which is a local organization, and MASS, which is the superintendent's organization, has used in the past to offer guidance on certain areas.
Yeah.
So if you have what they do is they have I think they have 27 people that work for them, and you sort of ask what it is you need, and then from there, they go to their cadre of people, and they start to elicit questions, answers, responses, and you move forward from there. The goal is that the people that we had spoke to, Jeff, our administrative team, our leadership team, our student services people, really weren't sure of when we say the word equity, what does that look, and then what do we need to do to move forward in it?
Yeah.
So that's pretty much how we did that.
Does this organization have certain parameters on the things that they would perform an audit? Like, what kind of other things do you get? With them?
So we've used them in the past
Yeah.
for things like looking at how we doing in special ed, let's say. We've used them in the past, and other companies of how we doing with our curriculum cycle.
Yeah.
We've used them in the past for different things.
So it's not just data then? They actually have interviews with
Yes.
people and they...
Yeah. Oh, it's just, so basically how it happens is you have a thing that says, so what are you looking for? We have this, we give ideas, they give us a prospectus, and then they say, if we do this, how long do you think it'll take? When do you need it back? And then they put forward with all of the things they need. And there's always hard paper, electronic transfer of information and
Sure.
materials. And then there are interviews. And the interviews are held at every level of person. And then from there, you get a report, you talk about it, and then there's action steps. And depending on what you see, what they see, what you need to do, how you do it,
Yeah.
we move forward. And I will say that they're a combination of they have retired folks on it, educators, and they also have educators now at the roles that we might need help in of different districts and different places that are able to tell what best practice is and why.
So I think as soon as we finalize our budget, I'd like to get into this more with the committee. But since our focus, and again, the December to April seems to be financially focused, I'd like to transition that out and get more to the committee on this and where we're at.
Yeah, I just think it's pretty interesting, fascinating actually, to think of where this might be applied to other areas.
Yes.
Sure, yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
And it's I think it becomes, and this is sometimes is new, I think, the Whitman Hanson Regional School District, but I think it becomes a point of, I don't think I know everything. I don't think Jeff
Sure.
knows everything. I don't think
Sounds
you
like a
know
healthy
everything.
exercise.
So we try to find people to help us along the way so we can march forward in a way that's the most helpful. Yeah.
Thank you.
So Donna, then we gotta move on.
Oh,
Right
one
now.
follow-up, though. I think it's important you mentioned after we finalize our budget, but are there budgetary decisions that you are making in your leadership team based on this report that might be helpful?
we're still too into that, probably not. Probably not for this cycle, but like George talked about curriculum pieces.
Yeah, I will
moving
say,
forward.
I will offer
Yeah.
one if I can.
Yeah.
I mean, I could do this all day, but
Me too.
one would be is, as we look at the glaring omissions of certain curriculum in the middle school level. Now, we received positive reviews for some of our literature at the elementary level because now we have a sturdy, evidence-based, research-based program there that hits all of those things. When we get to the middle school, we really don't. So that's one of the issues that we needed. When we get to the high school and we look at some of the choice that we have in the high school, it then gets into the things to look for to make sure you have a diverse program to move forward with. So there are implications, but the implications aren't necessarily from, you need to solve this with X amount of money. It's you need to look at this in a different way. And then we use the current funds that we have to say, how do we best employ this in the most equitable, economic way to affect education?
Thank you.
That's great, thanks.
Okay, and then just one more thing on goals. One of the goals was family outreach and parental increase. I had 3 people there yesterday at my parent meeting. I averaged 3. I thought I had 4. 4 was in for a different reason. We took care of her. And I'm still out and about trying to do that. The feedback was really good. It's still really good. Even with a couple of folks, we had a pretty good dialogue, and I'm glad I'm doing it, and that will be a continual, every month, going a different place. So I think the next meeting, I was at the high school this time. I think I'm at Duval next, and then I'm back at the high school, and then I'm at Whitman Middle School to finish up. So those are my goals. We'll continue to have that dialogue as we go on where we're at. I'm very happy with where we're at with the MTSS and the equity piece. Annual agenda, we made a couple adjustments to the annual agenda. OPEB was supposed to be on it. It's going to be postponed till April. We're in March already. Same thing with the audit. John's working with the auditors. And school choice. Based upon our meeting today, we have to, as a district, vote to not accept school choice by June 1st. So I'm tentatively putting school choice on the April agenda. However, after policy subcommittee today, that might be postponed till May. They're doing some research with the high school as far as program, as far as school students involved in choice, what they're actively involved in, and the whys of why they're here, and making sure Whitman Hanson students have the same opportunities, and if not, maybe more opportunities than our school choice kids. So we're not going to necessarily, if we're prepared for April, we'll vote on it in April. If we're not, we're going to postpone it to May. I'd rather not postpone it till the absolute date that I have to notify the state by June 1st. Those are the pieces of changes on the annual agenda. Quick COVID update. We're mask optional right now as of the return to school. I've gotten to see a lot of kids. Some kids still have masks on, some staff still have masks on. I did a straw poll of principals, and it doesn't seem to be an issue. We're not having kids saying, why are you wearing a mask, why are you this? I mean, and I'm speaking from my own son. My son is in 8th grade, he wears his mask still. He's still not comfortable with the crowds. My daughter couldn't wait to take her mask off in 6th grade, and that's her comfort level. And I think that's what you're seeing in the schools. And I think, it was about time from the commissioner to make that decision. I appreciate the committee saying we're going to follow DESI guidelines. We unmasked on buses moving forward, and if things change, we might just have to pivot as we go. George, do you know the date that the state's stopping the testing, or the giving out the test? Is it April, the second week of April?
I believe that is the date that they're going to stop the optional testing, is the second week of April.
So we have very poor turnout from parents asking for these tests. I think everybody can get a test now. I mean, I have a stack at home for my kids now because we opted in. If the state stops, I mean, there's more tests out there in the FDs in both communities. They've asked us, do you need some? I said, I got plenty. So I will keep the committee and the community updated with COVID as we go. But right now, we're mask optional. Kids seem to be enjoying it. I have noticed things for our 8th grade trips. Different venues are now becoming, New York City you don't need a shot card anymore, or a vaccine card, or masks anymore. So that might impact what we do for the 8th grade trips, much different than we had in October. So those details are to come. But quick COVID update, that's where we're at. Full day K, I'm just going to go up to the podium and
Do you want to jump down to high school?
Oh, yes, I'm
high school
sorry.
program
Yep.
of studies or not?
Chris,
Yes or no?
yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah, I missed that.
That's how
number.
we keep the numbers.
Yep, yep, I didn't even look at the number. Dr. Jones is here. We had to pass over Program of Studies last meeting. He's got a brief update on the Program of Studies for the committee's approval.
I believe you have the memo for the program of studies, or the proposed changes to the program of studies in front of you.
We do.
I would just call your attention to a couple of things if I can. I know they're all numbered in order, but it's better if we take them in groups because they're in three major groups. If you look at number 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. Those are courses that we're recommending to take out of the program of studies for this year. They return next year. What we do is we rotate courses in and out to offer more choice to students for different electives and things like that. That's a normal everyday occurrence that we have. If we look at number 1, we remove the statement in there regarding examinations and assessments because we've gotten rid of midterms and finals, so it doesn't have a place in the program of studies anymore. If you look at number 3 and you look at number 4, that's TV Production 2, Whitman Hanson News Team. Those have both been removed because they've been revamped into different courses and integrated into different courses like video production and things like that, where we're looking at TV production about media not just being about TV. So students get instruction in all different types of media and ways to advertise and market and things like that. Then if you go down and look at number 11, applications of advanced algebra, that's been removed. That's been taken out due to our new math pathway, or the math pathway that we've been trying to do, where students moving from Algebra 1 to Algebra 2 and pre-calc, there was an overlap where students in one of the courses wasn't quite getting enough to go into Algebra 2 to get the others, so we had that kind of bridge course. It's taken about 2 years, 3 years, but now what's happened is we've gotten that curriculum or that pathway so that students transition from course to course and all that material gets covered in the appropriate courses, so they no longer need that bridge to fall back on. The next one is digital citizenship. That's been removed. Sounds a little odd in today's day and age, but that's covered in our tech classes. That's rolled in. So as we move forward, you notice that different things are getting rolled into different courses because they make more sense to be taught in the process of learning things and doing things. It's much like a couple years back, we got rid of computer applications when we put in our financial literacy graduation requirement, because we don't need students sitting there saying, okay, open up an Excel spreadsheet, this is how you type in it. We need students learning something, saying use an Excel spreadsheet to do that, and the students learn it as they go if they don't already know it when they walk in the classroom. So these are just all updates. The final one I want to call your attention to, we're pretty excited about. Excuse me. We're adding a course, or we're proposing to add a course, Women Writers. And this goes right back to what George was just addressing about our curriculum. Curriculum, especially in English, students need to, well, history as well, students need to be able to see through a window to other perspectives of other people in a diverse age, and they need to be able to look into a mirror and see themselves in the literature that they're reading and things like that. So this course has been added, and one of the pushes for this was the success of our Teen Lit course that we put in. So that's it. Any questions?
Fred?
A couple things. One, in removing the TV production, and also might as well be the same for news team, what they're rolling into, were those courses offered last year, or are they offered this year?
They were offered last year, so we don't get sign-ups into these other courses. It's really name changes and things like that. They're old courses that have kind of gone the way of the dodo, so to speak. So students don't sign up for those, so we're taking them out. It's more of a cleanup of the program of studies.
Okay, so they weren't, the there weren't any students signing up for TV production?
No, because of our newer courses, like our video production and things like that. We put the news on every afternoon on YouTube, and the kids go in, and we have a green room inside the classroom. They produce their own things.
Okay, so what we're offering now supplements,
It exceeds what was.
that's what I want to make sure that
Yep.
we're not cutting anything away. I mean, we've had some very successful students come out of our halls with various employment. One of them works for a major TV station.
Yeah, no,
We all
absolutely.
know James. You know, I mean, couldn't be prouder of the kid, you know.
We won't cut anything away like that. It's more of the idea that when you think about like the news team and TV production, it narrows the scope of the course so that they just focus on that, where by doing this, we're more up to date on modern media techniques and methods and tools.
You say that there's a new course, women writers.
Mhm.
Do we have a course that are men writers?
Easy.
I'm asking.
He can ask the question.
No, we do not specifically have a course named Men Writers.
Steve?
Hi, Chris. On number 12, the advanced placement of computer science principles.
Yes. That's,
Did you mention that?
I did not. That's one I missed right above digital citizenship, number
Yeah.
12. We've gotten rid of that because nobody has signed up for it. That's an AP course in computer principles, and for the longest time, it's been sitting there. Nobody
Yeah,
signed up for it.
okay.
Our other AP computer science is filled up, but AP has two different types of computer sciences. Students have never signed up for that, for us to run it, so we're taking it out. If a student does express interest, we have ways of accommodating that one student.
Yeah. Wow. Very good, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions for Chris? Chris, so I know, just to clarify, so this was presented
This-
to school council? They
This
looked
did
at
go to
this.
school council and was voted on and passed by the school council.
Thank you. All right, great. Can I get a motion to approve the program of studies as presented?
So move.
Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous, great. Thank you,
Thank you very
Chris.
much for your time.
Thanks.
So briefly up on the screen, this is what's out there. I just want to show it to the public. Not going to go into every slide and explain it. David, John, Dr. Foley, myself, put together this PowerPoint on universal full day K. A lot of that stuff came from our summer program, or our summer conversations. The why, we all know the why, but we want our parents to know, and we want our community to know the why. This isn't just, hey, by the way, we want to provide a full day program for our kindergarten, for our 5-year-olds. We truly believe this, and we want to make sure our parents know this. What are the advantages of full day K over half day K? We talk about academic opportunities and social emotional opportunities. You can see through this slide that kids progress and advance if they have been given the opportunity to be exposed to more instruction at a younger age. Same thing with social emotional. We talk a lot about social emotional. One of the biggest issues we're having in social emotional are kids returning from COVID, not knowing how to act in front of peers, in front of others. Same thing with half-day K kids. The kids in a full-day K program learn routine, learn how to act with peers in a social and academic setting, more so than students who are exposed to just a half-day program. Same thing for at-risk students. Again, we try to, studies show that the impact of a full-day K program will eliminate at some point students who struggle or address those people at an earlier time. How many Whitman Hanson kids attend full day and half day, and how do we compare? So 58% of our students attend full day K, 137, 100 in half day. Massachusetts, 96% of students are in full day K, 65,000, almost 66,000 are in full day, and 23, almost 2,400 in half day. So we're not in a good spot there. Same thing on this slide, our half-day K enrollment with the towns that only offer half-day, or offer a full-day K with tuition, half-day K. So we are, and in my video I said, we're number one here. 78 kids right now are in the half-day K program as of 12/9/21. And you will see some of our locals, the Cohasset, the Hingham, the Duxbury, Norwell. They have a very small population, and candidly, when I spoke to my subgroup was, well, if Duxbury only has, the Cohasset only has 2 students in full-day K, and they have 100 kids in the district, those parents are willing and able and can afford a full-day K program. So it wouldn't be financially sound for the school to offer that because parents are putting their students in. The closest town local to us is Hanover at 31. We still are above, and George talked about equity. This is an issue for us because I don't know, we haven't drilled down to the why of why our students are in half-day K. We haven't gone into the socioeconomic impact of how many students can't just afford it. But we all know it's the right thing to do for our students, and this number needs to go down. Just a graph on enrollment, half-day K versus full-day K. Another graph where we're at. Conley, 44 to 29. Duval, 44 to 29. And Indian Head at 68. They have 3 classrooms of full-day K, and they still have 28. So we're pretty across the board in our half-day K enrollment. But you will see there are more families in Indian Head who are paying for that service. These are as of 20 that have adopted full-day K. So I think 3 years ago we were saying there's 36, 38 schools out there. Now we're one of 24. We're one of 24 in the state that don't offer full-day K. We still charge tuition. Just locally, where we're at, similar slide to before. Again, our Plymouth County School Districts with half-day K, and some notes for people to just look at. What do other towns charge? This is a good slide for us. This is just tuition rates across the board, but we'll look at locals. So Whitman Hanson charges $3,200. I don't remember the last time we raised that. Situate, who is now a tuition-free, was at 35. Norwell at 4,000. Hingham at 3,750. Hanover at 3,750. And Duxbury at 4,000. So we're the lowest with the highest attendance in our half-day grade. How much will the school budget? We talked about this. And basically, it's my budget presentation. It's online there, and that's going to be updated as we go. You know the numbers right now. We'll discuss some options here tonight on full-day K. Next steps, and we just tell people to email you folks, let you know how they feel. We also still, Chris, we have that info box for folks. It's still there. That's a general email address that I get that I can forward to you, so it doesn't have to be personal to a school committee member. We use that during COVID, so info@WHRSD to ask questions, support, come to meetings. We want people to be here. And then I listed the dates as we go to May 2nd of 2022 to vote on the budget. What we're trying to do. And then we talked about registration, because right now we are actively registering for kids, so parents have to pay that deposit if they want full-day K. If we end up absorbing that in the district budget for next year, all those deposits will be refundable to those parents. But we did have to take a deposit right now because we don't have this program in place. Why is it being presented this year? We talked about it as a school committee goal, as a superintendent goal. This is the year. We've talked about it for a long time. So this is why it's here. And that's it. It's in your packet. It's online. I'm talking about that, and we'll continue to talk about that as we go through the budget cycle. But I just wanted you to see what this committee put together as far as information that can be distributed to the public, and in the work of the summer and the subcommittee and the breakout sessions and the school committee goals. So, and again, there's a 7-minute YouTube video of the superintendent sitting on a kindergarten chair talking about this. and trying to meet the younger age group on YouTube. So we'll talk about as we go. I think we all know the why, and I think that, thank you to Don and David. Dr. Foley, appreciate it for putting together those statistics for us and putting together that presentation. Yes.
If I may, I have one add-on that we didn't get to put on these slides, but we did talk about it last summer, so and it's a funding piece, right? And are there any grant funds available to help us start a full-day K program? And the state of Massachusetts offered that in 1999. That's when DESE and the state believed it was beneficial for school districts to offer that. And they offered it through 2017. So for 18 years, grant funds were available to help. They haven't been the past 5 years, and we now know nationwide and locally, the initiative is for 4-year-olds, pre-kindergarten. And those grant funds, I'm sure, will be coming perhaps in the future. But we don't want to delay any further on this because we've missed the boat on those grant funds that were available for 18 years.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Fred?
Yes, sir.
Perhaps this is the wrong opportunity to ask this question. It's budgetary related. I think, you know, as far as myself goes, the need is there. But we had asked if we knew exactly how much we were subsidizing.
John has that.
Medicaid.
So as soon as we get through that, I'll have John, he put a sheet together for you. You remember that question about what we subsidize, and he's got that accurate information.
That should come off of the overall impact, I would think.
Yeah, yes, I believe that to be true. Okay, thank you, and again, thanks for the support on that. Just very briefly, March 22nd, we will have people from DESE here doing our mid-cycle tier review. So special education, civil rights is audited every 6 years. We're in year 3. You might have noticed in the Express that we had to publicize that we're looking for information. Parents are asked to do a survey from DESE. That's all, that was out there. I wanted to make sure it was on the agenda so you folks know that we will have people from DESE looking at our civil rights and our special education. We've submitted a ton of documents already for them to preview. They've highlighted a couple things they want to look at. They will be here on site doing some walkthroughs, so we will have people from DESE here. They will be talking to Lauren and myself, building administrators, special education teachers, but really doing a walkthrough. One of the targets this year, they're looking at our timeout rooms, making sure they're not substantially separate, kids locked away in a corner. That was a focus of DESE this year, and that's a piece that they just want to see what we provide for students when they have their issues or their meltdown, that they have a safe, adequate space where staff is accessible to them and they're treated like students and not somebody that we forgot about. So that's a piece statewide, but they're going to be looking for that. But just so that you know, we're in a really good spot. I'm really not concerned about this at all, but in case, you see people around or people say, what were those people from DESE doing here? It's our mid-tier review. It'll be much more detailed year 6. Again, the 6-year cycle, we're halfway through. Any questions at all on that? The next piece is a vote on the policy administrators contract, or the policy for administrators contracts. We updated some language that Chris and Fred had highlighted, I believe, and it's in your packet. And once approved by this, I think we can, we don't have to submit this to MASC, do we, Michelle? This is our own policy, correct? Yes, but we put it online. We put it online, right.
I thought we needed to just give it to MASC for them to put it online. They put it online.
Yeah, that's what, okay, they don't have to approve it, obviously. No. Yeah. So the updated policy, and I'll just read it, is prior to posting an administrator's position, the superintendent will meet with the committee, and do you want to be more specific to school committee, or is committee okay? I didn't even think of that until I just read that. The committee in executive session to determine financial parameters of the contractual package. The superintendent may, upon request of the committee, survey other school systems to determine market value salaries being paid for comparable positions in each system. Prior to offering or executing any changes outside the parameters, they will be brought back to the full committee for consideration. The length of second and subsequent contract of employment for administrators shall be in accordance with state law. Subsequent and second contract renewals for administrators shall follow the same process as described above. The contracts of the superintendent and school business manager are negotiated and awarded by the school committee in accordance with state law. In this case, an administrator is an assistant or associate superintendent, director of student services, or principal.
Fred?
There would be other folks that the superintendent would negotiate a contract with.
Yes, but these are the ones that are specified under the law. Other directors are not. If you want to include, that's worth the policy subcommittee talking about. These were the people that the policy subcommittee got when we started this, correct, Chris? Last summer. Those are
Yes,
specific.
and this was the scope that we identified in the first reading last time.
Correct.
Yeah.
And I'm sorry if that escaped my brain. I just, would feel more comfortable with the all contracts that are negotiated.
So that would be about 30 to 40 contracts that I have, that I negotiate with. I'll do, from directors to grounds and maintenance to tech services, so that's why we narrowed it to this scope.
Department heads, perhaps.
My department heads are in Unit B of the Teachers Association.
So why don't we,
Facilities or-
yeah, so why don't we do this? Can I get a motion to accept, or can I get a motion to accept this as presented, and then we can get into discussion and
thank you.
amendments?
Second.
Great. So, Fred, you had a question. If you want to make a motion for an amendment, hang on one second. Chris?
Yeah, we did look at this, and I think we have to keep in mind that we hire the superintendent to do his job, basically. And I just don't see a need for us to get in the weeds with all those hirings. That's my personal opinion.
Well, and I think when this was brought to us at the policy subcommittee, these were the positions specifically that we were looking at. And then last meeting, these positions were here, and it wasn't brought up that we were going to do these other ones,
Yeah.
right?
Yep, this is why we discuss it. Steve?
It's a little off topic from that, but I would include school in front of committee
Yes,
once in that.
yes, I agree.
And it just.
Sure,
and then
we
you
can clean
say
that up.
The
So,
committee afterwards.
You want a motion for an amendment wherever it says
Yes,
committee to
please.
change it to school committee?
Motion that we amend the language so that it includes school once in front of the first use of the committee.
Wherever it says committee, great. Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Great. Amended.
seconded that?
Amended unanimously. Great.
Got it.
So back to the now amended policy. Any additional discussion? Fred?
Yeah, and where I come from, perhaps it's a matter of identifying, the proper department heads. I know they're going to be looking for a new facilities manager. We're combining facilities and tech. That's going to be a pretty big hire. And I think if we, and I'm sorry, and I perhaps should have tried to escape with the next policy subcommittee, but if we identify the different areas and be able to talk about the parameters, because we have a lot of people, for instance, and I don't think it's any secret, we pay a mileage stipend, and it's a flat stipend, as opposed to paying a IRS guidance mileage for somebody. So you have employees that get X amount of dollars, and they just get that no matter what, how many miles they travel within district, et cetera. And then or you can have it that people put in for their mileage, and they get compensated a fair rate based upon averages. As you see what's happening with gas prices, and I'm sure there's going to be an adjustment upward, people that are going to be using their own vehicles would end up probably getting more money, once the IRS guidelines come out. And I think and it's also a very standard business practice when you're paying people back for the use of their automobile in driving. I think it's at like 58 or 59 cents per mile. It changes every year, based upon, the conditions. But, I think that's the fairest way. In the past, it was argued, well, it's just a real pain for people to keep records. I mean, now, I know with my company, we use a phone app. You just put it, You sign up on your phone. Every time you get in the car and take a trip, when you stop, was that a business trip? Yes, boom, and it gives you a report at the end of the month, and it also, I believe, emails it or...
And Fred, I think what you're saying is the superintendent can certainly look into the practice of how we compensate for mileage and/or stipends. Yes, and we can talk about that if need be, but kind of bringing it back to this policy, any additional, is that fair? You'll look at that if you think it's something that's worthy of consideration. I know personally, I've looked at that from an employer standpoint, I'm sure you have too. It ebbs and flows. Mileage, sometimes you do the stipends at work, sometimes you do the mileage at work. It's, I don't think it's, depending on the cycle, it's not gonna have a material impact, but getting back to this language, any other different comments, discussion?
Other than the school part that I just amended, this is what came out of the policy subcommittee.
Yeah, and again, not only policy subcommittee, this was presented to the full school committee last meeting. So this is our second reading. This is not the first reading. This is the second reading of the full school committee.
I want to be very
I
clear.
think even, oh, sorry.
Yeah, so, and I think the only other thing I'd add, just for clarification, if I remember the genesis of this discussion, I think, Fred, you had identified there was when we started this process, there was a Mass General law that clearly identified that the school committee had to approve, and I think it was just the contracts of the superintendent and business manager under Mass General law. It explicitly states that. So what the policy committee has done and what we've talked about up to this point is expanding the scope as to what's required under the law and expanding it to some additional positions. Certainly, the will of the committee will carry if we want to expand it further or not, but that's kind of where we're at and how we got here.
That's correct.
Okay. So any additional discussion, otherwise we're going to move to a vote. Okay. All those in favor of the policy as presented? All those against? Abstaining? Okay, so it passes 9-1-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Excuse me. PTO meetings, just a general. Last night, I was supposed to go to the PTO meeting at Duval, I had to cancel, got to be here instead. So I think the next opportunity, and Chris, if you want to attend, Conley on April 6th at 6 PM. There is no school committee meeting that night. So I told Karen I would be there at least, but I want to send that out there. I'm going to try. Dr. Foley, when's your next PTO meeting at Duval, so we don't miss you? Yeah. April 12th. Is that a Tuesday? Yes. Yes. So April 12th, Chris, if we can. And then I'm going to catch up with Mr. Dupre. He listed a couple meetings in March, but I think we have conflicts already. And he's the last PTO for us to hit. That doesn't mean I might revisit, but we've hit Indian Head, Duval, it'll be Conley, and then Whitman Middle. And Hanson Middle does not have a PTO as of yet.
Could you give me that date for Conley again, please?
April 6th.
Thank you.
And then you said April 12th, correct, Darlene? Awesome, thank you. And that's part of our charge, is to get out there and see members of the community. Am I on number 12? Do you want to start off, or do you want me to start off?
I'll take the first one.
Yep.
So, just within our budget discussion, so for the school committee, most of the school committee members attended. There was a joint meeting of the boards of selectmen specific to discussion of the school budget. I think there were some points that were shared. I know several of you were there. For those that weren't there, I would encourage you to watch it, just to have an understanding of some of the context. In the spirit of moving forward, I think there were some takeaways in terms of process that were identified. I'm going to kind of leave it to the committee now as if anyone has anything constructive to add, because it was a fairly long discussion yesterday, and I don't really want to do it again, unless anyone else really does. If there's anything constructive to add, I kind of wanted to open that up to the committee. Otherwise, we're going to move on. Okay, great. So, Chris.
I just wanted to reiterate, I hope everyone watches it, because it's pretty, you get a lot out of it, I think.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Okay, moving on.
Okay, so the last meeting, we talked a little bit about some scenarios that John and I put together. I think, John, what do we have, 11? 11 different scenarios in your handout, because we've had to do this.
So we don't have, okay, there's a handout coming, I think. Yes, or do we have this?
You have it.
Oh, we do have it.
Yeah, Michelle gave it to you.
Oh, Michelle gave it to us.
Correct.
It's
Like tonight?
it's this right here,
Scenarios.
scenarios.
Sorry, Michelle, I have so much stuff in
Last
front of me
page.
right now.
Sorry, Chris.
No, it's fine.
We
I
really
buried
just
it, I'm
finished
sorry.
So,
Hold on,
no worries at all.
it's in our piles. The very last, second last thing.
Got it.
So hopefully, we captured what the committee was looking for through our budget presentation, through some of the questions, use of E&D, use of ESSER, trying to pull up some scenarios. So I'm just going to run through them, and then we'll take questions at the end, I guess, so as we go. So scenario 1, half-day K, and which we presented, with costs from E&D, splitting it down the middle. And I'm just going to look at the percentage increases for you folks. So scenario 1, the percentage increase to the assessment is 3.48% for Whitman. For Hanson, it's 4.35%, with a general overall increase to the school budget of 2.98%. That's with full-day K, the classroom staff that Lauren had asked for in the district budget.
So when you say half, can
It
you,
says half.
can you just explain that half kindergarten? Sorry, what is that?
So half the kindergarten costs come from E&D, so
Okay.
340. That's on the original budget when we did the 3 scenarios. We're taking away half of the costs out of E&D. Okay?
Yep.
Scenario 2, we took all the costs for full-day K out of E&D, the $740,000 out of E&D. That leaves Whitman with an assessment of 2.09%, Hanson with an assessment of 3.19%, and a district overall budget of 2.98%. No kindergarten costs from E&D in FY '23. So we fully fund kindergarten in the district budget with the 2 added staff members that Lauren had asked for. Is a 4.87% increase to the Whitman assessment, a 5.50% increase to the Hanson assessment, and again, a 2.98% increase to the district budget. Kindergarten, using E&D, $200,000 a year. One of the scenarios, can you space it out over 4 times? And John and I just took $200,000 a year, okay? So in 4 years, committing E&D, 200 this year, next year, the year after, and the year after, it's a 4.12% increase to the district budget. For Whitman, a 4.88% increase to Hanson, and a 2.9% increase again. Then, scenario 5, we just eliminated full-day K and kept them at half-day K with tuition-based. Adding those 2 teachers, as we requested, it's a 2.09% increase to Whitman, a 3.19 again to Hanson, and a 1.68% increase to the budget. Scenario 6, full-day K, using no E&D, and the ask of taking all of those professional salaries from ESSER that we're asking for this year, the 7 that are in ESSER, to the budget. So it's a 6.92% increase in the Whitman assessment, a 7.2% increase to Hanson, and a 3.94% increase to the overall budget. That means we would have 0 professional staff being taken out of FY '23 or FY '24 ESSER monies. That was one of the asks. Scenario 7. You take scenario 1, full-day K, using half of E&D for that, or 360 or 370, John?
340?
Is it 340 or 370? 370. 370, sorry. And putting the ESSER 3 professional staff into the district budget is a 5.5% increase to the Whitman assessment, a 6.04% increase to the Hanson budget, and a 3.9% increase to the overall budget. Again, that's using $370,000 of E&D to pay for full-day K, but including those staff members that are paid for, professional staff members paid for from ESSER. Scenario 8, same as scenario 1, taking half-day K, half of E&D for $370,000 in E&D to pay for full-day K, all of ESSER 3 professional staff and paras, meaning we have no staff members in ESSER in '23 or '24. It's a 6.19% increase to the Whitman, Whitman assessment, a 7.59% increase to the Hanson assessment, or 6.59, and a 4.25% increase to the overall budget. Scenario 9 is, again, using $370,000 of E&D for full-day K and taking just the BCBA and the 2 EL teachers, keeping the interventionists that are in ESSER 3, putting those folks in the FY23 budget. It's a 4.21% increase to the Whitman assessment, a 4.95% increase to the Hanson assessment, and a 3.33% increase to the overall budget. Level service for FY23, and this was more difficult than not because of the unusual situation last year of our budget. It's a 0.57 increase to the Whitman assessment, a 1.94 increase to the Hanson assessment, and a 0.05% increase to the overall budget. That's because we were able to use or front-loaded our budget with circuit breaker money going forward. Scenario 11, full-day K using no E&D, and I said to John, just using the BCBAs and ELs only, is a 5.61% increase to the assessment, a 6.11 increase to the Hanson assessment, and a 3.33% increase to the overall budget. Going back to these scenarios, and when we built our budget, the numbers that I had for assessments, again, going back to, the much talked about Madden report, whatever, and I said this to the select boards last night, I didn't have any basis for numbers from Hanson this year. I had a 5%, up to a 5% increase of the assessment from the town of Whitman based on what was said last year at budget meetings and through the report that we had prior to. We tried to keep the budget to a 3% increase, providing our students with the best opportunities using federal funds and the less E&D or one-time money that we have. One thing that this committee has to understand, we're committed through ESSER 3 to use some of that money for staffing. How we use that is up to us, but I can't buy things. Dr. Jones wants me to buy a new elevator for the high school out of ESSER. I can't do that. I have to, by the grant, by the rules of the grant, I have to apply some of that to professional staff. We're proposing to do it in the most diplomatic way possible, keeping in line with that grant and making sure that we can have affordability in both of our communities, as we heard last night of what they have. Just for the record, for people that weren't there last night, Mr. Heineman said that Whitman could afford the 3.48% increase was in line, which what he talked about. That was the number we talked about at the last school committee meeting. And Ms. Green mentioned a 3.0 increase for the town of Hanson. That was what was discussed last night. And up to, and that's what Lincoln said, we were in the area. So I don't want to misquote him or whatever, but we're in that ballpark. But again, we tried to provide these assessments or these options for the committee to digest, to discuss as we move to an assessment number next week. That being said too, and I'll remind the committee, once we set an assessment next week, we can always lower the assessments to the towns. We can't go higher than that, but we can always go lower. And I don't mean that for the committee to go lower, I just want to give you the law and make sure that you understand it and people at home understand it. We have had these budget conversations all the way up to town meeting, whether or not the town's can afford it or not, whatever, but the school committee has always set that assessment and then continued those discussions. So we tried to provide some scenarios for you, keeping the services that we feel are essential to our students, and keeping up with an assessment that will help us moving forward, and keep us on our 5-year plan to reduce or to come up with a 5-year plan for our students. So that's, I don't know if Fred had a question.
So before we do that.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Before we do that, so, because I think this will help us. So I appreciate you being responsive and giving us, and John, the 11 scenarios and a whole host of things to consider. Given all of that, as superintendent, do you have kind of a recommended path in terms of where, taking everything into account thus far, right? Do you have a sense of where you think we should be, or?
Yes.
Okay. Can you share that?
Scenario 3.
Let's do it.
Scenario 3.
That's where I could have stood this entire time. That's full day K with no cost to E&D. And we're still using federal funds for our coaches, and that sets that assessment of under the 5% to the town of Whitman that we've talked about in the past, and the 5.5 to the town of Hanson. One other item that I'll share is I did some conversation, or I did a survey of our staff members. I will have 5 Unit A members retiring next year through attrition. I will have 3 Unit A members in '24 that we can use to supplement some of these people from ESSER. I have 0 Unit A retirements in '25. I have 4 retirements in 2026, and then 8 retirements in Unit A in 2027, just so the committee has an idea of where people are going to be going. And I also have 3 people in Unit A that said, yeah, I'm retiring, I just don't know in the next 5 years where they are. And that attrition piece is important for this committee, especially in certain areas. If it's an elementary teacher that's going to retire, or 2, they're usually at a higher cost. I can replace them and then fund another teacher's salary out of that. So through attrition, we can start to buy back some of those folks in ESSER. And also for the committee, using ESSER funds for our coaches and for this BCBA and for these 2 ELs. These 2 ELs wouldn't have been on our horizon in October this year. But because we had a bubble come up, I need them. I don't know if that bubble's going to go away, and I can't give you a responsible answer to say, I want to put them in the district budget because they could go away in 2 years if we lower our numbers in EL. And the BCBA piece, because we've seen an uptick in behaviors at all of our buildings, we're asking for that additional person. We had contracted service for that BCBA in the past. We'd like to get them on staff, but that doesn't mean in the next 2 years we don't reallocate those funds based upon the needs of our students. BCBA special education, again, for behaviors, we've seen the uptick. ESSER money is perfect for this because it addresses what we've seen post-COVID. And again, we're committed to using ESSER funds for staff members. George reminded me today 3 times, ESSER money is for post-COVID people, and we need to continue to do that. I think our important piece is, as he talked about MTSS today, and it's really important, we've never had these positions, that we implement them over time, but we also might have to readjust how we use them through attrition or a better model. We kind of threw it in, it's working, and then being good administrators, we evaluate as we go. So if you want that recommendation from the superintendent, S3, or scenario 3, is what I think is important for our district. It was our goal this year. We can afford it. And I don't know, I heard different things from the towns, but that would be my recommendation tonight. Okay.
So I'm going to open it up to the committee. I would ask if the committee is so inclined, if we could start with questions and then we'll move to comments. So I'd like to give everyone an opportunity to get their questions asked, and then we'll give everyone an opportunity. We can stay the evening if anyone's so inclined to do as many comments as people want. But can we do it that way? Just because it'll be easier, I think, to get the questions opposed to questions and comments and so on and so forth. So can we start with questions? So Fred, I got your hand first. Question.
Busing. I've received a few phone calls about the way we're applying our formula for mandated busing and how it affects the cost of non-mandated busing.
Yes.
I believe you're aware of.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I am. And actually, it's another piece that we're going to talk about today. So Budget Subcommittee, I don't want to step on Budget Subcommittee.
That was the next update, so we might as well just do the Budget Subcommittee update now, right, at this point. So to answer that question, so there was some busing analysis done from Sean Kane, who's here tonight, and John Galvin. And basically what they were looking at was that there is a way to potentially change how we've calculated our mandated and non-mandated busing costs that would potentially allow us as a district to seek greater relief from the state in terms of aggregating the way we do the mandated busing costs. So if that was the case, it would be a scenario where by changing the analysis, the mandated busing costs would go up, the state reimbursement would go up, and the services would remain unchanged. So that was presented at the last budget subcommittee meeting. Sean had reached out and asked if he could do that. We had the meeting, and we have another meeting tomorrow morning at 8:30 to continue that conversation to see how it works. So that would be an advantageous impact to the budget and potentially both towns. So that's kind of where that's at, but nothing here is reflected in the budget because we're not there yet.
Right. That's what I was just going to ask. Do you have an idea about what you're talking about cost savings? I mean, like 100,000 or?
Not yet, because I think we've charged, and we're not there, right? I think we've charged John with making sure that we feel comfortable with actually the way we would do the filing with the state. So it would be premature to say that at this.
Because that could certainly help the budget, but we're not certifying it tonight anyway.
Well, and it's important because there's also a difference between, because of the reimbursement cycle.
Yes.
If we were to make the change now, it doesn't necessarily mean it would impact this budget. It might impact FY '24. Again,
That helps with our 5-year.
Yes.
it helps with the 5-year. It still could have an impact, but we're not there yet. And so that's what is being worked through presently.
All right, thank
So, and we thank Sean and John for bringing that to our attention. Certainly anyone that wants to present a thought that can help the district and the towns, we welcome. So that was where we're at with busing.
Does that answer that question, Fred?
Yep, thanks.
Other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Just to clarify, so in scenario 3, the coaches would still be paid with ESSER funds, the BCBA and the ELs that were proposed, those new staff would also be paid through ESSER funds, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I'm going to come back to you, Fred, unless anyone,
It's actually a follow-up to Hillary.
sure, I don't see anyone else's hand raised to go.
Just to reiterate, how much of the ESSER funds are being utilized in scenario 3?
John, George, you have I would assume another $770,000. It's 7 positions, depending on how much people are getting paid. But we're asking for a secondary math interventionist. I'm asking for a BCBA, 2 ELs, and there's currently 3 other interventionists or coaches in that fund. So I think 8 people.
8 people, and how much is an ESSER 2?
ESSER 2's gone at the end of this year.
No, 2 point, is it
2.3 in
Okay.
ESSER 3. 2
That's ESSER 3.
That's ESSER 3, correct. And again, the stipulation too is it has to be used for certain things. And we have to use a certain chunk for mental health, social emotional, some learning loss, and people. And I think that's the key piece for, I think folks out there, when they rolled out ESSER 3, and George, I'll grab you in a minute, but when they rolled out ESSER 3 last February, we thought we hit a windfall because it was like, here's $2.3 million for your district. And then in June, they came up with a set of parameters for us to do. We had to survey our community, and our community was like, this is what we want. We want learning loss. We want to make sure we have some summer programs. I know some folks said, hey, rebuild this, rebuild that. We can use pieces if George can be so smart to tie it to that. And we've done that in certain areas, but it has to be COVID related. It just can't be, hey, by the way, and again, we're having real issues with the high school elevator, and Dr. Jones said, can't you use ESSER money to fix that? And we actually thought about that. We're like, can we swing that? And we can't. We have to be ethical about how we use the funds.
What about the chiller, ventilation?
That is a potential, I know, but it has to, I don't know that, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so
Go ahead,
if I could,
George, talk a little bit about ESSER 3.
ESSER 3 was written with many different parameters, and it was wide-reaching. However, when it talks about you have to put 20% to learning loss, and you have to put that, and then X amount to mental health issues, there's actually the formula when you fill out that grant that tallies not only what it is, the total amount spent, but that also tallies the amount spent to address those key pieces that you have to do. When it comes to things like the chiller or events that are things that you want to do that exceed procurement, and in this case, procurement on the ESSER grant is about $30,000, you would have had to have all of those things done previous to getting the grant approved. So before the grant was approved the first time. So where we went with the combination of humans, and then where we went with the combination of $25,000 in certain areas for things like maintenance, for things like Chromebook keypad, Chromebook parts, or things like more air ventilation for the system that we currently have now, that was all accepted. So in getting the grant, there are parameters of which we can work from when we have choice, but there are also parameters that would be very difficult to do.
Yeah, I want to hold on, Fred, before we go to you. Any other questions?
Yeah, just to double check. The E&D balance is still 1.8.
1.8, so we're asking in this budget to spend 400,000 for Chromebooks,
Right.
125 to pay off the water bill and be done, and then up to the committee. So really, the 400 is a real ask. I need those Chromebooks using one-time funds.
Okay.
And we're coming up with a plan to, our next cycle will be 2026 and then 2029. So we're working in budget subcommittee to figure that out, but I do need, we're going to have Chromebooks offline in June, and we need them for September. So I'm looking at a $400,000 expenditure of one-time funds from that 1.8 for Chrome, 125 to pay off the water bill. Technically, we only have to pay 65 of it, but John's recommendation is using one-time funds to get rid of that, and then depending on the committee, what you want to use for E&D. So if you use nothing for full day K, you still have a substantial balance, something we haven't seen ever.
Okay, so that would be about 1.3 million.
Yes.
And just to repeat what we've said before, Mass General Law says that a regional school district can maintain E&D balance up to 5% of its operating budget.
That's correct.
So that's, 5%
Correct.
of 50 million would be 2.5 million, and we're
Correct.
above that, so 2.5. So if that was to be used for Chromebooks and that water bill, we're at about half of what
Yes.
we could maintain. And then just piggybacking on the elevator repair issue, that conceivably could be an E&D repair expense. We could fund that out, since we can't out of ESSER, so those are the things that I think of in keeping an E&D balance,
Yes.
right? That's a repair that, or the alternative to that elevator is going to our towns and asking for it to be a capital item. So we could manage that E&D responsibly, and take care of items that we, thank you.
Fred?
I would argue that the repair of the elevator, depending upon, as long as it meets the threshold, will be a capital expense to the towns, to be divided up appropriately. I mean, if we take it out of E&D, it's almost the same thing, because the money belongs to both towns anyways, but I would argue that. And I know we have some very substantial capital needs right
Yes.
now. Maybe we can utilize some funds, some funds to help out the towns with what our capital requests are. But that's a sudden and,
Yes, right.
And
We're repairing it now, but this is, it's become very problematic in the past year and a half. And it is impacting our students who have physical limitations and our staff who have physical limitations. We were down Friday afternoon till this morning, and we've had to have classes in the library, classes in the Performing Arts Center, students in the office taking tests. It's not a good situation. So we need to really dive deep, and I don't want to branch off. I'll give you a report on that at the next facility subcommittee meeting where we're at. I don't have all the information. I just know it's becoming problematic.
So other questions on the budget? Otherwise, we can transition to comments on the budget if anyone has any.
And this might be like what you guys are working on in budget subcommittee, but, George, we just spent, 15 minutes talking about the coaches and the interventions and things like that. So, and it probably isn't another document, but with this using ESSER funds to pay for staff, and I did express that concern at the last meeting, just making sure that there's some sort of plan where if next year the EL bubble was not a bubble,
Right.
and we actually
Yep.
need these staff members, we need to find a way to keep them so that we're not losing other staff members, right? So, and I think that I hope that is something that is on people's radar, right? Because I do, I think that is certainly a concern. That is a concern that I have. So.
Can I just comment?
Yeah.
It's
That
on-
that was my question.
It's on the
like,
forefront.
Okay.
And my problem, and it, as much as I can be open, I don't know what we're going to need after
Right.
next year, because we haven't had a real year for 2.5 years. So I'm really struggling to say, we all need this, and throw it into the budget, because I don't know what's going to come out. And that's a true assessment of where we're at. Our kids are better today than they were 6 months ago,
Yeah.
but I want to see where we're at. And the FY24 budget is going to be the one that I can really truly say, these are our needs going forward for our kids.
Yeah.
We're still in triage mode.
So as a comment, sorry, Beth, real quick, so as a comment, just to build on that, right? So I think if we're saying, hey, we're gonna use one-time money to fund these positions in the FY23 budget, then the understanding is that's how we're funding those positions, which means if we don't have the one-time money in the future, then there is no assurance we're gonna have those positions. And if we do need those positions, then we're gonna have to really think about the operating budget going forward to figure out how it works, right? So, but at the same time, you're also in a bind because where ESSER is different perhaps than other aid programs is there's a specific requirement to hire staff.
Right.
So we can't just not spend it on staffing. It's just, I think, having that recognition that when we look at that 5-year plan, if we're spending $700,000 on these positions, we all have to understand that's how we're paying for those positions. So something's going to have to give in the future. It can't just be we're going to find $700,000. So as long as we all go into it with that understanding, I think it's better. Beth, and then Fred.
Yeah, my question is on scenario 4, Jeff.
Yep.
Okay, so
Yes,
that's
sorry.
basically the same as 3, except we've taken $200 for
200,000,
years,
yes.
200,000.
So we're committing to that program and then chunking it. over-
But keeping everything else as is, the full day K, all those people in ESSER and things like that.
If the ESSER people stay there, yes. It's just paying for full day K in a different way.
And just to lower the assessment to the 2 towns.
Correct.
Yeah.
Fred?
And that'd be 800,000 in totality.
Yes.
But ESSER 3, we have 3 years to spend it.
We have to be done by September of '24, correct? We can earmark those people for that fiscal '25 budget, correct? But it. It's a federal. John, up to the mic, please. Thanks.
It's the federal calendar, so we can do things with that money until September 30th of 2024.
Okay.
So we spend the money now, evaluate next year. People are still needed, we have that, but the plan could be, there may not be money in '24. You know, and if we go into it with our eyes wide open, but I think that there's a definite and definitive remediation need. You know, that's what the money's for, and we owe it to the kids.
Correct. Yep.
You know, to be able to give them every opportunity to catch up and to prosper as much as they can.
And I just want to be clear that there are different avenues that we're exploring, like when Jeff talks about the retirement aspect and attrition. But let's say, and I'm not sitting here, I'm sitting here saying, educationally, I do believe that these positions will have to remain, because that's how students learn, and they learn differently. I'm also saying, though, is that if there is no money to be had and we still need this, then there's the educational philosophical discussion that has to take place that says, is 17 in a class at Indian Head in 2nd grade better than 22 in a class with an intervention program? Because then what you'd be looking at is analyzing the existing budget that you have in order to make sure and really be clear-cut on the priorities that you need. So there are ways to do this and keep it if the data shows and if the reality of the next 2 years shows that this is something that needs to be done.
Okay. Other comments? So I think the only other thing that I'd like to do, Sean, come up, we'll give you a minute in a second. We'll give you a minute in a second. You know, we did hear from the towns, and Jeff shared kind of what they gave us as an indicator. The one thing I'd be interested in understanding, because I can't really find it anywhere, is what are the town's budget increases projected year over year, notwithstanding the schools? Because I'd like to understand what the town budgets look like, right? Just as a basis of comparison. So, you know, we're looking at roughly a 2.98% year-over-year budget increase. I'd like to understand what the towns are looking at for budget increases, because to me, I'm not saying it has to be precise, and I'm not saying it has to be exactly equal, but there should be a general equity, for example, of, you know, what is the rest of the town doing in terms of a year-over-year budget increase? So if the committee's okay with it, I would like to send an email to Lincoln and to Lisa and just say, hey, can you get us that? Because for me personally, I'd like to understand that. I'd like to understand where the towns are. I think one of the things we tried to cover last night, and you can see it very well articulated here, is a 3% increase in our budget. If we're not using E&D, and I'm not advocating anything, I'm just doing the math right now. If you look at scenario 3 and we look at a 2.98% budget increase, that translates to a 5.5% increase for Hanson and a 4.87% increase for Whitman. So you can almost see that correlation between it's almost double, right? What our increase is, that's going to translate to the assessment. So I think just kind of understanding where the towns are, to me, it's a data point. I'd like to understand, but I'd be looking for the committee to okay that email going out. Does anyone
Yeah.
object to that?
Here's your partnership. Sounds
Yeah,
good.
okay, thank you. Chris, and then Sean.
I'm all set.
Okay, Sean, go ahead.
Yeah, just one more layer, I think, to consider would be, or in a question that I have. It was brought up a little bit at the Budget Subcommittee meeting, but I'm not advocating for the use of one-time funds. I think that's a smart financial decision to not do that. That being said, if you can use some one-time funds this year and work it into your budget over the next 5 years in a sustainable way, that does address the sustainability issue. You know what I mean? If creating a sustainable budget over the next 5 years is one of your goals, it doesn't mean it necessarily has to be done right now this year. If you could potentially use some one-time funds to address certain needs and then work it out, kind of like work out the kinks over the next year or so, then to me that does, I'm not necessarily, you want to think it through more, but I think it does address the sustainability issue. And it may create more, open up more options for you if that's helpful. If that makes sense. You know, so creating some assumptions, using potentially some one-time funds to kind of get the program up and running, say full day K and some of the interventionists, and then working out some of the kinks over the 5 years with attrition and some of the stuff that you talked about, and maybe some other areas that could maybe open up the option to use that this year. If that makes sense.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, actually, I'm going to ask Steve. Steve's been quiet, so I'll go Steve, then you, and then Don.
Well, the thing with John, Gavin, and Sean, what they presented to us, I thought was just absolutely mind-blowing and excellent at the same time. It was perfect, it was spot on, and I know we're not talking about the busing piece right now, but just saying we got that bump by going forward with that plan, it's a perfect plan, whatever, and we get that bump. We do have, in a way, an obligation to take advantage of these one-time funds. With Jeff saying, and I don't know if I've heard this before, maybe I have, but we're obligated, I know we weren't obligated, we can't use it for certain things, but what we can and are obligated to do is use it on staffing. Well, this is probably the only way, unless there's another option in anyone's mind of how to use that on staffing. You know what I mean? Things could even out for us after, with what Sean and John were presenting, things could even out for us in FY24 with the whole, I want to call it the busing bump. I don't know, but we get closer and closer to almost knowing all of our options. And one of the, John S. here, one of his presentations last week was really kind of showing us with like a $2 million E&D in X number of years, and I don't want to, get everyone excited or anything. It was just exciting to see. It definitely puts us in a good way. So it's almost like we're getting there. We're fitting the pieces together.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
That's it.
And then, I don't know which one of you was
Go ahead,
first.
Don.
Thank you, and then Hillary.
So I'd like to hear some talk around our goals, and I know our 5-year plan is important. And I think the state is helping us out with the Student Opportunity Act too in directing us to what our goal should be. I think our goal should be, how do we get more state aid too? Because we've always said that. It's flat. We talked about hold harmless. And what the state, in this graph, this is document 18. I know you probably don't have it with you, but this is the one that talks about the percentage of our state aid right now, our Chapter 70. It's 44% of our budget. And our operating assessments locally from the towns is 51%.
Well, there we go.
There you go.
51% operating assessments. In the Student Opportunity Act and Chapter 70, it talks about the target share, the target that education funding should be is that your local assessments should be 59% of your operating budget, and that your state aid piece should be 41% of your operating budget. So that's a a number that comes from DESI, it comes from the state, and that really should be part of our goal, part of what we should be looking at. And again, we talk about we're not getting any more state aid, but how do we? I looked at Bridgewater Raynham. They were only 100,000 in hold harmless this year, FY22. The Student Opportunity Act, with those changes in the metrics, they're getting $4.2 million at Bridgewater Raynham, projected for the FY23 budget. They had some increasing enrollment. We're not seeing that, so I'd love to have a discussion, in the next few months or whenever about how do we maintain our enrollment, right? And one thing, I think this recommendation by Superintendent, number 3, does that in initiating full-day kindergarten. It does now increase our enrollment a little bit by counting students from half-day kindergarten to full-day.
Thank you. Lori?
I think that one of the things that came up a few meetings ago was that with full day K, because of the hold harmless, we will not be reimbursed with Chapter 70 funds for those students. Is that am I?
Yes.
Okay. So to me, using one-time funds to pay for full day K doesn't make sense if we're not going to be reimbursed, right? And I think I had said this at a previous meeting where you might be able to offer a coach and then the next year be like, oh, we can't pay that, and it might not, you can't offer full day K, and then the next year be like, sorry, we can't pay for that, we have to pull it out, right? So I think that is certainly something to consider when looking at what we're gonna spend our one-time funds on. And considering what the parameters of ESSER is, it makes the most sense. I don't think it's a good idea to spend E&D on full day K at all. And especially when we will not receive any Chapter 70 increases or reimbursements for those students. Not a good move, so.
It helps us get a little closer,
right.
closes that gap a little bit of that hold harmless, right, but we will
But
not
we're not
recognize
gonna get
a
any
single
financial
dollar.
benefit, and then we're just gonna be
Still
back
spinning
at square
our
one,
wheels.
right? So that's all.
Yeah, and we'll share a little bit of an update on that.
Okay.
They came out of Budget Subcommittee before we're done, but we got people stacked up, so I want to get to, Rosemary's been waiting a while, but Fred, go quick.
Real quick. E&D, I'm very afraid to spend that at all, other than if we use it to hit capital items. One-time expenses, Chromebooks, I think it's a wonderful way of buying Chromebooks. Very appropriate. As far as the ESSER monies for the coaches, we spend it, and then we assess next year. We may need all of them, we may only need some of them, but we're not gonna know, and that's what this money is for. We gotta spend it. That's what it's for. And with the mindset that we may have, geez, I'm sorry we can't fit this into the budget, but we're also facing declining enrollment, and that doesn't help us with hold harmless at all. That's gonna be a big factor in the future, so, we're stuck with the hold harmless, unfortunately, for a while. MLCs are going up, but I don't know if it'll ever be enough of an impact for us.
Rosemary, thank you for waiting.
Thank you, Rosemary Conley, Whitman, Mass. 405 Franklin. It is hard to sustain something in debt. You ask anybody, oh, you have this budget, if you're in debt.
Can you speak up a little?
I said, you can't sustain something when you are in debt. The target share is a real number. It's the number for the average amount to educate a child. The reason your money, your aid is going into your hold harmless, it is hold harmless debt. And until you pay it off, we won't see much aid. We'll see some, but not as much. So the way you have to think about it is, how do we get out of debt? And how much are we losing? Say 3.5 about is what I'm kind of calculating in aid when we are not out of this debt. That's the mindset. And if you don't have that mindset, you will have a mindset of erosion and a continuation of erosion and loss of students, because you won't be able to provide the services needed. So the state gives a real number. It is target share. It has the name, target, and that's a real number. It's calculated by our wealth. It is a formula that goes with it. So we know the towns can afford this because it's been calculated by our equalized value, how much we can pull from the towns. Chapter 70 is a very valid good formula. The new formula actually gives a lot more aid back. So if we think differently and we think about how we service these kids, we can get out of debt and start to create that real state sustainability. And I hope people think just a little differently here. Thank you.
Thank you. Justin?
Thanks, guys. First, I think I can answer, at least sort of answered one of Chris's questions from earlier. The town general budget's going up about 3.2% with the current projection. That's with a placeholder of the schools at a 2.5% assessment. We know it's going to be somewhere north of that, probably. So if scenario one, it's about 3.5%, the town's general budget will increase about 3.5%. It's more or less.
And Justin, I think specifically what I'm asking to kind of, at least this is how I'm thinking of it, to normalize for the schools, taking the schools out of that, right? So
Yeah.
if you take the schools out of the equation, then what does that percentage look like? Because then like we have our own thing that's obviously going to, but I'm kind of, so that's still helpful, but that's kind of what I'm after.
Yeah, you should probably talk to the town administrators to get the exact number, but that's
But thank you.
roughly where we are. But I'm glad we've had a lot of hold harmless conversation. Sounds like you may talk about it a little bit
Yes.
more soon. To kind of marry what Sean, Don, and Hillary were saying, I do see a potential opportunity if we can project when, the first year of the Student Opportunity Act, we reduced that hold harmless level by about $1.5 million. I don't know if that's the change to the statutory method or Student Opportunity Act, but somewhere in there it's making a difference. Full day K would help close that gap, and Bridgewater Rainham seeing a huge increase in state aid as a result. That could be the end of our one-time revenue solution. Like, I would not be opposed to using one-time revenue to try to get out of this hole we're in. So that's it.
Yeah, so I had this update a little later, might as well give it now. So, sorry. So basically, one of the things we talked about as a school committee was, hey, hold harmless, let's try and understand it. So that was something that we took away to the budget subcommittee. Jeff and John set up a conversation with Desi, Rob O'Donnell at Desi, and we went through hold harmless. We spent an hour. It was extremely informative. There was a lot of different things that I got out of that. So what we're going to do, Michelle, is it already there? Or it's going to be? Link? It will be very soon. So we asked them to record it because the whole reason we did this was we wanted to make sure that, the school committee could see it in depth. So you'll hear the questions that we asked, you'll hear the responses, you'll see the data, and then we'll certainly put it on the website so it's available for the public. So what I think we talked about, we haven't had a chance to even talk about it as a budget subcommittee because we literally posted the meeting just to that end. But I think what we'd probably like to do is just get that to everyone. Someone like you, Justin, Sean, Rosemary, watch it. It's very informative. The school committee, watch it. And then we'll put it back on the agenda and let's have this conversation so that we all have the same information. But I think that was a clear takeaway for us, and I think Jeff and I talked about it. We won't spoil it for you. We'll let you watch it. Everyone can come armed to the same place, and then we'll have that conversation. So there was a lot of different things in there about variables and Student Opportunity Act and the like. So hopefully that's a good tease and you'll all watch it. Like I said, I feel uncomfortable biasing, like this is what I heard and got out of it, and I know we talked about that as well. So we'll get that posted and we'll get it on the agenda, and we can have we also, I think, even asked him to be open-minded to maybe coming back after we've all watched it and asking kind of the next layer of questions. So that's something that we've committed to try and hopefully figure out a way. I'm not sure there's going to be an easy way quickly, but yeah, so.
Thanks.
Hopefully that helps everyone, and thank you for asking, Justin.
You want to go right to it?
So before we leave, yeah.
Can I just piggyback, and having information can never hurt.
Yeah.
I can appreciate you wanting to get the information from the towns. I just want to, my personal perspective is that as long as the towns are treating us decent, I really don't care what police get, or fire get, or DPW, or any other department. Our budget shouldn't affect them. I don't think that if the schools have a need that is greater than what the towns can afford, as long as the town's not taking away from us and they're distributing equally, then anybody should lose their job or have to cut back. That's my own personal. Our budget shouldn't affect police, fire, etc. you know, providing that, everything's on an equal playing field.
Okay. Thanks for sharing your.
Just want to follow up with Fred, through you, Chris. I think that's the first time I've heard Fred talk about anything close to not wanting more information. It's an observation.
Okay.
That's it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. So to kind of wrap up on budget, because I think we can get into wrap up on budget, because so next meeting, we're putting budget on the agenda, and we really need to look to
Vote in a second.
to vote it. A week from tonight.
A week from tonight.
And that's the only thing on it.
We might have a couple other minor things
Minor,
on the
yeah.
agenda. There's a couple other updates, but that will be the primary reason
Yes.
for the meeting. There's at least one update that we have to share. We just got the update too late to post it. So, so what I would suggest is, Jeff, maybe you come prepared to lead with your initial thought here. But I'd also ask, can we also have kind of that ESSER sheet to accompany it? And an updated kind of 5-year plan, so we can kind of see how, when we do this, it all kind of plays together? And then we should be prepared to set an assessment, with the understanding that we know what it is, we know kind of what we're spending for ESSER, we know how that's going to maybe look going forward, and we go from there. So does that work for everyone?
Absolutely.
Okay, great.
Do you want to talk 5-year plan?
And 5-year plan, we might as well. So I had three updates that I was going to do as part of budget on behalf of the budget subcommittee that I think were relevant to the budget discussion. So the first one was busing, we covered that. The second one was DESI, we covered that. The third one is we continue to work through that 5-year plan. So I think by the time we meet, some of that interplay from what we've talked about and what we've looked at. But again, as we look forward, I think one of the things that's being highlighted is, you know, the lack of state aid. And so the lack of state aid causes that significant impact on the towns. Now, we can argue about whether there should be impact or shouldn't. The reality is,
It does.
right, if we need a 3% increase and we're going to get $120,000 from the state, then it's going to fall on the town. So, you know, building that plan is going to be important. I would encourage all of the stakeholders to listen to what we're saying, because some of the feedback we've gotten is timeliness around sharing what we think the numbers are going to be. And as a personal opinion, I don't think the issue is the timing. I think the issue is going to be the numbers. So, you know, as we go through that 5-year plan, I think there'll be some pretty clear, like, this is what it's going to look like. But again, you know, kind of where we were going, it's going to be very difficult to, whether it's a town or whether it's a school district or whether it's a business, it's going to be very difficult to operate in an environment where you're not talking 2 to 3% budget increases year over year. Like, I haven't experienced it. In my professional career, on other boards I'm on, like, I haven't seen budgets not increase. You know, maybe there's a year, something happens, great, you can hold it flat, but you're looking at a consistent 2 or 3% increase year over year over year. So that's where we're all going to have to try and figure out as we move forward. So, but that's kind of, we're working through that with the budget subcommittee. I think those discussions have been good. We'll share that through the superintendent when we meet next time.
Okay.
Next.
We'll just, John, you're up. Monthly report, and then just talk about ban.
Okay, excuse me, thank you. It's the monthly
Quiet for a
report.
long time, so speak up. I haven't heard you tonight.
The monthly report is through February. It's the one that looks like this. The first page is the revenues. We're 8 months in now, so the way you read this report is we had on page 1, 56,797,579.40 is the budget, and the year-to-date actual, what we've received so far is 40,251,175.73, or about 70% of what we had budgeted. Just for, and I know that I'm going to be going more into the budget on the quarters, so next month there'll be more, but around now you can start to look at the revenues and try to project out in your head what might or might not happen for the rest of the year. And just for an easy, quick one, everything above Hanson Capital Building and above on the revenue you can assume that we're going to get that money. And again, this is the lens of thinking about E&D. How do you add E&D? That's what I do all day, unfortunately, is how can we increase E&D? The two ways that you can, the biggest ways to increase E&D are to get more revenues in than you budgeted, or to spend less than you budgeted. So this is the revenue side of it. Everything north of Hanson Capitol Building will not be a hit. It will not help E&D because those are monies that we've assessed and they're in the budget. We're not going to get any more than we were assessed. South of Hanson Capitol Building, Medicaid reimbursement all the way down. Those are the ones that, if we get more than we've budgeted, that would add to, at the end of the year, would add to E&D. So again, more to come on that, but that's a quick way to look at that. And we could talk about it more next time. Next is the expenditures, again, through February. Page 19, page 18, the amount, we've spent $35,515,000 so far. There's still $17 million available with $4.7 million in encumbrances. Again, I'm moving quickly because this is a monthly report you've seen before. And just some other quick reports that, again, I'll go into further detail on the quarters or in March. The next one is the actual comparison. That's this one. It has a balance. I'm sorry, it's the one that says the balance sheet at the top.
What's it titled?
It is Whitman Hanson Regional School District fiscal year 21 to 22, actual comparisons as of 2/28/22. The top part is the balance sheet. The second part is the revenue expenditure comparison to last year through February. And then down below is a fund balance activity comparison. I think at the last meeting, last month, I kind of pointed it out up the top in the balance sheet comparison. If you look in where what should be yellow, I don't know if you have a color copy or not, but it's $896,960.11 for reserve for expenditures. That was assuming scenario 1 in the earlier discussion. Again, I didn't know what number, that's the number that's in there for right now. And again, E&D is just what it would be if the year ended in February. Of course, the year does not end in February, but it's just a snapshot in time of where we are. And if you look closely on the fund equities, it is up $211,000. Not that meaningful in February, but a lot more meaningful than October, let's say. Revenues and expenditures, again, with the comparisons that I can go into it if you have any questions on that. The next,
John.
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, I'm a little behind, I think, but on the first page we're looking at now, could you just kind of explain the 9100 and 9110?
Oh, Chris is on a different.
Tuition in school,
Yeah.
tuition to other
First
schools.
page you were talking about.
Yep.
Okay, so next one.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. That was coming next. That's just a comparison between the two, year to year based on function, but DESI function. So 9110, is that what you said?
Yeah.
The tuition to mass schools, maybe I could ask you, Jeff, is that
That's
9100.
going out?
That's our district, yes.
Out of district? And that encompasses,
Private, no, John, privates aren't in there, are they? Is it just collaboratives and residentials, or is it private as well?
It's just tuition to other schools, not privates. SPED aid assessment, it's on page 18 of the larger document. And then SPED tuition to other schools. That's that was 9100.
Yeah, so that's our tuitions that go out. And you also had a question on
Yeah,
9110?
I had a question on what he was talking about before.
Yep.
So the 86,960, that's when you put for reserve for expenditures, that's if we do half of the full day and the Chromebooks and the water bill.
Yes.
That's what.
And a small amount of bond premium that would have to be set aside. I think it's 1,600 something.
Okay, thank you. This right here.
Chris, did John answer your question?
If it was scenario.
I think I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you. I can follow up later, thanks.
And-
I don't want to bog you down.
You can ask me.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no.
So, and then the final document on the budget is every other fund other than the general fund, what the balance is, the activity in every fund. It's, the title of that is Revenue and Expenditure Schedule as of 2/28, and it's 3 pages long, so you've seen this every month. It's just every other fund other than that. Circuit breaker is on there, and nothing's changed in that yet, because that comes on the quarters.
What was the title of that? I couldn't hear you.
It says, it's District Revenue and Expenditure Schedule as of 2/28, so it's this one. It has every fund. It starts with 2104, fiscal year 22 financial literacy.
With the ESSER funds.
Next one is ESSER 1.
It's got the fund numbers down the left, right?
Deficits, right?
No, it has the left-hand column is the fund number and then the fund name. No?
You pass this
Fund
over
and
to
not
You
fund.
want mine?
Pass that over.
Oh,
I get-
I just
got
can't.
it.
Got it?
I think
He has a packet if you want.
I'm gonna have to go to this. No, it's, none of the
It's near
names
the
are
back,
there.
it's near the back.
Yeah.
Fred needs to
Get
check.
rid of the Google Drive.
I think they're worried about the iris front.
Yeah.
It's in the cloud.
It's in the cloud.
Any other questions, or that's pretty much the standard budget?
Yep.
And then if no other questions, what was the next one? I don't have the agenda in front of me. It was was
Yeah,
it the
can we
band?
talk about the band?
The band,
So,
I'm
I know Dawn had asked about band a couple weeks, or a couple months ago.
So capital costs are assessed to the towns based on their actual costs. One thing that is assessed as a regular expense is the cost of the financial advisor to place bands, bond anticipation notes, or bonds in the market. So they charge a fee to do that. And that's historically been a district cost, not assessed to either town. So if Hanson puts a bond anticipation note out, the district pays the financial advisor's fee for doing that. Or Whitman does it, the district pays it. It hasn't gone to town. And I believe Ms. Byers had a question about that and wanted to speak about that.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
I think your question so if we put it in as an operating expense, then it's essentially split, 60/40.
Yes.
Whereas if it's an indirect expense of a capital expense that is borne by one town, I think Don's question was, well, wait a second, would it make more sense if Hanson has to borrow X and there's an indirect cost associated with that, then the bill should be sent to Hanson. If Whitman needs to borrow, am I getting it right? Is that
Yeah,
kind
I
of what you
think-
wanted to talk about?
Most,
Thank you.
No, yeah, exactly, and I'm wondering where that conversation happens, where Hanson would have come forward and said, oh, school district, can you, obtain the bond or the ban for this capital expense, and we do that. Is there then a conversation of, yes, and there's a cost, and that goes along with that, and that cost is going to go to the individual member town? Does that conversation happen? Maybe it needs to happen, or, right, because I know our member towns actually have better bond ratings than we do, because we've used our E&D, and we got a letter last year that our bond rating went down. So I think as a district, it costs us more to borrow money, the interest rates. Our member towns have better borrowing power because they have better bond ratings online. So I'm actually, interested why, one of the member towns made that choice, and then there's that cost that goes along with it, and the district has paid that cost.
Yeah, right.
And as far as the interest rate goes, the borrowing town is assessed that. They don't, they don't get by on the interest at all. I know
Yeah, but
this-
wouldn't you want to get a better interest if they borrowed it themselves? They have better borrowing power.
I believe
That's my point.
The way it was structured, and I was on the peripherals, but because it was a district project that the town approved, the district did the ban. I believe that was the original intent. I don't know that anyone delved as deeply as to what the advisement fee, I guess that would be the way to say that.
it's an advisory fee, yes.
And how much money is that?
It was, I think it was $500. We had an unpaid bill on it, which
Okay.
prompted the discussion, so I think it was
I mean-
$500, $550, something
Yeah,
like that.
so, and I mean, I think it's totally appropriate to send that bill to the town, you know, and ask them to pay that bill, because it's part of their project.
Right.
You know, I think that was a very good catch, and I didn't know that that bill ever existed, so that's a very good thing that that was caught. And the same for Whitman. If they want us as a district project, you know, to do so, we'll be glad to do that.
So I think when Dawn brought it up, we wanted to have the full discussion as a committee. I would agree with, I think that was her sentiment, and I think that's your sentiment. I would agree with that as well, and I think that's, you know, perhaps a change in process that, John, you could just reach out to Lincoln and Lisa and just say, hey, this is something we identified, this is how we're gonna do it going forward, and then to Dawn's point, you know, thinking out loud, if their bond rating is better, you know, certain projects, DESI, building projects, et cetera, they have to go through us. But other projects, if it's something that as those projects become identified in the future, if there's a cost savings to the town by them doing it directly, we're certainly not going to argue, right? So, yeah, HVAC enhancement would be a perfect example, or, you know, so I think for like the middle school, I think we have to do that one, I think.
We have to
Yeah.
do
We
that,
have to.
'cause that's
Yeah, I'm
an
not talking
MSBA
about that.
project.
But there's other projects. So, John, does that give you enough guidance of, that'll be our kind of a process going forward? And, you know, again, this one's $500. I don't think it's a big deal. But is everyone comfortable with kind of that, taking that direction going forward?
Absolutely. Would you like a motion?
I don't think we need to motion. I think it's just for the record, the minutes will reflect that this will be the process, unless Chris feels otherwise.
No, I just wanted to make a comment that, this, like, for Dawn to catch this and bring it to the towns, it's along the same lines as John or Sean coming to us. That, to me, feels like a good interaction, and
I think it's a little different because I'm not sure the towns would necessarily know of the bill, right? Because if we're just taking it, right?
I'm not saying they missed anything, I'm not saying that.
Okay.
I'm just saying, to your point.
The more we can do better and share and
Yes.
improve process, absolutely,
Exactly.
100%.
Yes.
100% agree, absolutely, great. Thank you,
Hey,
John.
thanks, John. So,
John, was he going to?
you want the kindergarten report?
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you have
Oh,
that?
yeah.
Sorry about that.
Is that in this?
It's not in the packet.
Okay.
I don't believe so. 'Cause
So at the last meeting, we talked about, we had, the subcommittee meeting was back in the summer last year, working on kindergarten, and I had come up with a chart for 19, 20, and 21 about the subsidies, and I remembered that I had done that, and I had updated it through yesterday, and actually today, for fiscal year '22. Again, I did this an hour before the meeting, so I haven't had a chance to pass it out to anyone. Is that something that I don't want
You want to
to
just put it in the packet, Fred, or we can give it to you, or we can
Can we
distribute?
do it orally and then email it tomorrow? Or-
Sure. Okay, so 19, 20, and 21, I guess your question was, what was the general fund subsidy? Is that what you asked? Okay, so in fiscal year 19, the subsidy from the general fund for the kindergarten revolving was 0. In fiscal year 20, it was $146,408.08. In fiscal year 21, was $241,792.91. That's things that were charged to the revolving fund, but were then, the revolving fund did not have enough money to pay for it, and it had to be charged back to the general fund. And then, so far through March 9th, there's been no subsidy needed. Right now, we have $118,000 in the kindergarten revolving fund, so there's none needed. By the end of the year, there may be, I'm not sure. Does that answer your question?
A little bit.
Because I think you had asked what the general fund portion of full day K
Right.
was too, so I can give you that. Fiscal year 19, it was $404,000. Fiscal year 20 was $340,000. Again, I'm rounding the numbers off. Fiscal year 21 was $257,000. So far through this year, it's $284,000. So that's in addition to the revolving fund.
Okay. So would I be incorrect in saying, if we look at, we're being given a cost for full day K of $750,000. Now, if we're already spending $284,000, that should come off of funds that we need to raise and appropriate toward full-day K if we've already been spending that money in our budget.
It's already in the general fund, so 740 would be the incremental cost above that, yes.
Above that. So it's $1 million for full-day K.
As of right now, yes.
740.
That's the full cost of the program, yes.
I just want to understand, because the way my mind works is, hey, great, did we just
That's what I
lower
was thinking.
our cost? You know, just be able to start it and
And that's,
sustain it.
that's on the sheet too. So again, real quickly, fiscal year 19 was 867,000, the full cost. Fiscal year 20 was 966,000, and fiscal year 21 was 979,000. So it's very reasonable that it could be $1 million at the end of this year.
Okay,
Thanks, John.
Appreciate it.
thank you. Where are we? Job description.
Job description. So you have in your packet just a second reading of the job description. George, for Director of Ops, George, Fred made a couple of comments. We made a couple of changes to the Director of Operations job description. I'd like to get that approved tonight.
Yeah, so there were two bullets that you, there were two comments that you asked for. Familiarity with local and state building codes, as well as school budget project experience preferred. We combine that just for ease into one extra bullet. It's the second to the last one under such alternatives to qualifications. That's the only change that happened beforehand. Different than last time.
Okay. So can I get a motion to accept the job description as
moved.
presented?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous, great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, George.
Just a vote on the 2022-2023 academic calendar. There are no changes to that. The calendar is a start and a stop date. We will add the half-days in as we put them together for professional development, grading days such. But you have a start and stop date. And in my pile here, I lost my calendar. Thanks, Chris.
Do we have it?
It's in there.
It's in there. So you're looking at a school start date of August 31st and a school stop date of June 13th. 180 days.
So can I get a motion to accept the calendar as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Discussion, Fred?
Quick question, how many snow days is that built in?
We just put the 5, so 14, 15, 16, 19, no, the 20th and 21st. Because the holiday is the holiday.
It's highlighted.
Any
Get
other
the black
questions?
and white copy, it's all highlighted.
Yeah.
Because I know that parents are going to ask, but the first day of school's been in August before, a couple years ago.
Yeah.
When you have, I just want to put it on record that like it starting in August is not abnormal.
No,
Like
not at all.
that's all I'm getting out there because
20 years.
that's what I'll hear on the, that's what I'll hear.
Teachers will be in on the
Worth your keep,
29th.
That's all.
Teachers will be in on the 29th, kids will be in on the 31st.
Yes, Steve?
I was looking at this morning and I thought, I know that they'll have a January 2nd as it's not New Year's Day, but as the day that
You have observation.
would be off. Oh, yeah, the observed, thank you,
Yes.
that's the word I'm looking for.
I think
Does that tie in here, or does that not become an issue?
It is, yeah, thanks, it's a good catch, Steve.
Oh, I got up early.
We looked at it 3 times. And Sunday is the holiday, so it has to be observed on Monday, correct?
long weekend.
Just made the kids go to school.
Thanks, Steve. No, that's a great catch.
Thanks, Uncle Steve.
One for the kids.
This is my birthday.
So I will bring the calendar back.
Well,
probably
let's just make can we get a motion to amend? Or unless there's more.
I have one more comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do we need a voting day in November? Is there a primary?
Tuesday, the 8th is on there already. There's a no school day, Tuesday, November 8th.
So we did honor their
You
request.
can't look at the
No.
black and white, you gotta look at the
September.
colored ones.
I'm
so
looking at, okay.
You know
Oh,
it.
it says holiday, that's all that threw me off.
Yeah, it just
Okay.
says
So
holiday.
September, we can have school that day. As we've done it in the past for a primary. We haven't honored that request. We can have a discussion about that. But we took off the November 8th,
So,
because they asked for September 6th. And we did not put that on there.
so that would be the other item. You want to just bring it back?
Yeah, I think
Next
we bring
week?
it back.
Yeah.
So topic.
Can we withdraw the motion in a
Yes.
second? Yes?
I'll withdraw.
Great.
I'll withdraw. Yeah, Dave did the second originally.
Because we do have a request from the town of Hanson for September 6th off
Thank you for catching that.
as a voting day.
Oh, primary.
There was
Primary
something, there's
day.
always a vote.
No.
Speaking with the principal, because we actually spoke about this, and because it's September and the kids can go outside, we've had primaries there in the past, because they're not a regular election day. Election day, we need to close. So I think I'll bring it to the committee for discussion for next week.
No, they stay open.
Okay, and yeah, and then let's make sure we circle back with Beth.
Yes,
Please. Okay, we'll do. All right, we can do that.
so that's passed over.
Yep.
So warrants, I got an email from Hanson, February 1st, about warrant articles being due. We brought warrants to the Facility Subcommittee at the 16th meeting of the School Committee. So the Facility Subcommittee looked at what we had prioritized in October and had to shift a little bit because of winter and the roads. So in October, when we voted, we didn't have any roads on the capital agenda as our priorities. We really had to reshuffle that and put some roads on. So I submitted to both the town of Whitman and the town of Hanson using the Whitman updated template, which Lincoln got to me in February, what they wanted, with a lot of explanation, pictures and things like that. So both towns have the same pieces of information. So I'd like to just, summarize briefly the warrant articles, and if anybody has any questions, we can change them, but this was what the subcommittee we had talked about, and what we sent to the towns. And these are placeholders. This doesn't mean that if the committee wants to pull this back at some point, they can pull this back. Correct, Michelle? They're placeholders? Yeah. So, again, Article 1, we talked about playgrounds for Duval and Conley. We actually put this together as a one lump sum. Duval needs a redo of a playground. The Conley big playground needs some updates for ADA compliance and some repair, and they have an interior playground which we'd like we have to remove or redo because it's out of compliance. So the first warrant article is $700,000 for those playgrounds. Second warrant article to Whitman is to repair the parking lots and roadways of the high school. Drive in now, and you'll see why. We did not know that in October.
We feel why.
The third one is $100,000 for HVAC for Whitman Middle School gym to try to eliminate some of the mold issues that we've had in the past. Again, Ernie has asked for that in the past, and now we're going to try to rectify it until, if and when we have a new building, a renovation, or a remodel of Whitman Middle. Article 4, we're talked about trucks, the sum of $78,000 to purchase two F-250s. That might be a low cost right now. I'm not sure. That's what Ernie gave me. Yes, Fred?
That's a certain town share? 'Cause
Yes,
two trucks are
that's
more.
correct. That's correct.
W4 is the Whitman one.
Yes, I'm just reading Whitman right now.
Okay.
Article 5, appropriate sum of $45,000 to get the large fans, the big, big fans for Conley. I don't want to say it in public, but I'm not supposed to. But those two fans for the Conley ceiling. We've asked for those in the past. I think it'd be essential now. Article 6, $6,000 to replacement schedule for the rooftop units and chillers. We're looking at a study to prepare a replacement schedule for that. The RT, I call them the R2D2 units on the high school, frequently are down, and Ernie wants to look at, it's a total of $10,000 to look at a study, to hire somebody to say how we can do this better and put us on a schedule. Article 7, sum of $13,000 to reimburse the district for 4 variable frequency drive replacements for the rooftop units. Again, we had to replace those. If you walk the hall on the 3rd floor in the fall, you heard them banging, and we had to replace them. And then Article 8 is the mold reimbursement to remediate the mold in the gymnasium that happened in Thanksgiving. Town of Hanson, $25,000 to replace the phone system that was passed over for the high school at Hanson Town Meeting a couple years ago. They passed over, they approved the Indian Head and Hanson Middle and passed over the high school piece of the phone project.
Okay, has Whitman approved that?
Whitman has approved that.
Okay.
So this is the only piece that's out there. Article 2 for Hanson is 118 to repave the regional high school roadway and parking lot. That's Hanson's side. Article 3 is $200,000 to repair the Hanson Middle School driveway. Article 4 is $51,000 for Whitman's half, or Hanson's half of the trucks at 51.2. Article 5 is Hanson's portion of the replacement schedule study for the rooftop units. Article 6 is $25,000 to refinish the Hanson Middle School gym floor. Article 7 for Hanson is $8,500 for the variable frequency drive devices that I just spoke about for Whitman. And Article 8 is $11,700 to reimburse the district for the repaired boiler inspection at Hanson Middle School. So those had been talked about through Facility Subcommittee. Some had been already costs that we had to send out, notified Lisa and notified Lincoln, and had to put on as warrant articles.
The fire panel and the smoke sniffers,
Yep.
I don't see those on here.
We did not put them on at this point.
I have a question about the playground.
Yes.
Is there any grants and things that would be
So
available?
I have Representative Sullivan looking at grants for that, and she was looking at an earmark. I have a Zoom call with Rep. Sullivan on another issue, and I will bring it up to her on Tuesday. She said she's looking for us to defer those costs.
Right, well, so that's what I mean, that wouldn't go on for the
Capital.
700
Correct.
for the capital, so.
I think we're looking for that expense, and if we find a grant, we can lower that cost.
Okay, that sounds better.
Anyone else?
It's a lot of money.
Yes, there's a lot of money in general to both
Yes,
towns, so.
yes.
Yeah.
And I know we're not we tried to prioritize, there are certain things, those playgrounds, I know we talked about in the Facility Subcommittee, they need a redo. And I don't know if it's one-time money, if it's ARPA money, if it's free cash, if it's us looking at doing that. We have to do these articles at this point, and see where they flesh out.
Now, will the Finance Committee be going over these also?
I hope so.
Next week?
We have a capital meeting next Thursday to discuss school capital in Whitman. So we will be there 5:30 next Thursday.
So do we need to vote to support what was sent, or?
Yes, just vote what we
Okay,
sent.
or vote to approve? Okay.
Yes, vote to
So motion to approve as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Great. Any discussion?
I have one discussion. As a regional school district, when we vote these, to place them on the warrants of town meeting, it's my understanding that's what happens by Mass General Law. So in the past, I think there's been some discussion and negotiation around, well, can we pull this, pull that? I think if that's the conversation that's going to happen with the towns, legally, if we could check with Mass General Law, it has to come back to our committee to vote. And then we then vote to remove that from the
To remove it,
warrant.
That's correct.
Could we please?
That's my understanding too, but I'll check with Andy.
Okay. And that would follow South Shore VOTEC? They
Yes.
send a assessment with, includes capital, and there's not discussion around that.
Any additional discussion? Fred?
And I believe in the past, once the school committee has agreed to it, we've just simply passed over the articles in town meeting. So if it's after the warrant's printed, then they just pass over it.
Unless we find out that we have money
Yes.
coming in and can change it before.
Yeah, you can always amend it
I don't believe that that's the proper way, though. I don't believe it is. I think the committee has to vote to remove it
No,
from the
no, I'm not
warrant.
saying the committee doesn't vote. I'm saying if the committee's voted,
And the
then
warrant's already
the
printed.
warrant's
printed,
already
passed over.
printed,
Oh,
we
okay.
can
then
pass
we
it.
would motion to just pass over, because
Oh.
it's
Yep.
by the vote of the committee, not
Oh, okay.
any single person.
That-
Okay. Good? Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous. Wonderful. Okay, subcommittee reports?
Fred?
Brad, anything on Whitman Middle School?
Yeah, Whitman Middle School, we had our walkthrough today with our request for proposal for designers. I'm going to say there was about 8 to 10.
Yes,
Now, was that all of them, do you know?
Yes.
Jeff? That was all that?
that was all that came.
That's
No.
all that applied?
I don't know,
We
that's all
don't
that
have
came.
applications yet, those are due March It was
Yeah,
the
I-
29th, I believe.
But I was just wondering if they had to be there today.
Oh, no.
They don't have to be there for the walkthrough 2 o'clock, no.
So it was a decent turnout. Ernie gave a decent tour. I was there for a portion of it, as Jeff was. Seemed like a good array of folks, that were there with their notepads and cameras and taking pictures. And Paul led our middle school principal led the tour and went over some of the educational plans, etc. And hopefully we get some very aggressive bids on the request for proposal. We'll end up having a designer committee. Hopefully everything goes smoothly. MSBA approves that. And we will have someone that will start working on the design aspect of the next phase. And I believe that runs through 23.
Correct.
So we're not there yet, and it'll take some time, but
Yeah, there were a lot of questions,
Beth was there, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and they asked, George, and they asked us if we were tied to the building.
Oh, no.
And George and I both said no.
Tied to the building house.
Well,
Emotionally.
Emotionally tied to the building.
Nostalgia.
Would we find that people would be emotionally tied to the building? And I
Like maybe around the neck?
Yeah, right. Take
said,
a
no, I've been in
tile,
Whitman for 48 years now.
take a ceiling tile from the gym.
Good.
Yeah, so, but it was good. They asked some good questions, a lot of educational questions they asked too, so that was good. I like that.
Facilities.
Facilities, Mike, anything?
No, when's our next meeting?
We'll probably meet after not next week, but the
Following.
next school committee meeting.
In April.
In April.
Budget subcommittee, I think we've exhausted, I think we covered the updates, but anything, David or Steve, that I missed? Or
You're just gonna love what we got.
Looking more into the 5-year plan and going from there, right? Taking it one meeting at a time.
Great. And policy? Chris?
Yeah, we met just before this meeting, again, and all 4 items on our agenda, kind of like old business we've been discussing. First one was the dress code. We've approved our policy on the dress code, and at this point, Chris Jones is working to update the handbook, right?
Correct.
Right, thank you, Hillary.
Will
Can I
that
just,
come
Bob,
to the full
we-
committee?
We
Yeah.
are going to bring handbooks in June this year instead of August, so the committee can approve the handbooks before kids leave for the summer.
Can I just add to that? So our policy, our MASC policy is very broad, and we as the policy subcommittee didn't see the need to change it, but when we talked to Dr. Jones at our last meeting, he and the school council were looking at the handbook dress code policy, because it is much more strict. So that the school council and Dr. Jones will look at that, and any changes they make to the handbook have to come to us, so.
Okay.
Chris,
Yes.
can Pilgrim Area Collaborative be added back on for
Next
April going forward?
Sure.
Yes.
And I need a report this month
Yep.
in April and April and April.
Okay.
Michelle, can we do that? April? You got it.
Steve Boyce.
Okay. That concludes everything on the agenda. Yes?
Want me to finish up on?
Oh, sorry. Please.
That's okay.
Oh,
Sorry.
Steve cut you off. I just try to get, Chris is
Sorry
getting
about
late. Long afternoon.
Yes, so the next 3 items are school choice, district admin coaching, and athletic director coaching, right? And these are issues that we've been having an ongoing discussion about, that come about. Several concerns were raised to me. Committee members have had concerns about whether or not it's wise to have these things, and if all these things are in the best interest of our students. One of the things I talked about possibly doing is putting together a survey and petition, asking the community about their experiences. We had input from Kevin Kafka and Chris Jones about some of the potential pitfalls that we have to be aware of. But Hillary brought up the point that it might be something we want to bring to the committee first, the full committee first, and as a way of maybe working with you or taking your suggestions. So that's all. My intention was to craft something and then present it to you before we did anything with it. So that's kind of where we are. So my ask is that maybe, in a subsequent meeting, for the school committee, we can put that on an agenda and at least discuss it.
Got it?
Yes.
We can probably add that for April.
Yes.
So we got Plymouth Area Collaborative and us.
Policy. And we're going to meet prior to that as
That's
policy
correct.
subcommittee.
Yeah.
Maybe once, maybe twice, before we bring it to the committee.
Sorry, Chris, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, no problem. Thank
Now
you.
we're good?
That's it.
All right. Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, everyone. 8:30 tomorrow, I should just pull this.
Oh, chair.
Oh, they might be, I guess so. I'm not sure.